There is no doubt that in everyone's mind, Mitch Kupchak is a Laker legend. How do you feel when you are referred to as a Laker legend, Mitch?
Well, I'm surprised to hear you say that there's no doubt in anybody's mind. There's certainly doubt in my mind. I got there in 1981, and of course, growing up, watched the teams in the 60s, and we're talking about guys like, Jerry West and Elgin Baylor and Wilt Chamberlain, and then, of course, Kareem. And, so you start to mention names like that, and then I hear you say something like you just said, that's real. I know you're trying to get me to do the interview, so that's really nice. I do doubt it.
But you knew exactly what you wanted to do when you retired, didn't you?
Yeah, unfortunately, halfway through my first year in Los Angeles, I got hurt. And, at that time, they really didn't know how to repair the ACL injury. So ultimately, I did have it repaired by Dr. Job and Dr. Curlin, who I know you know very closely, or knew very closely. They did the surgery along with Steve Lombardo. And like I said, they were just starting. So what they do today is so much different. Today, you're back playing in 6 months. So I missed close to 2 years. And, knowing that my career might be over and knowing that I still had a contract, I did try to prepare a little bit, for post-basketball. I started going to school at UCLA. It was close to my apartment in Westwood, and got involved in the MBA program there, which ultimately I did finish. And I did come back to play, but as you remember, I was dragging my leg around, and it was nice to be able to make a contribution, especially in that 1985 season. But really, it was just a matter of time before, I knew it was over. And the day that Jerry West asked me to come work with him, it was one of the best days of my life.
Yes, because you retired in 1986 and became an assistant under Jerry. What did you learn under Jerry that helped you to become the great executive that you are today?
Well, there you go again. Okay. With the buttering me up, right?
Yeah. No, you know what though? You're taking the same approach as Jerry. I did an interview with Jerry, and he was saying the exact same things. I mean, you want to push and give the credit to everybody else except yourself.
Well, back in '86, the NBA had just started to explode, and there was really nobody in the front office. Jerry was there. Bill Sharman was retiring in a year, and Mary Lou and Tania, who I know you know, were really the only people in the office. So when I went in, and the league was just beginning to take off, there was, with the salary cap, there was so much to learn and to do, and every day there was more and more work, and Jerry just kept on, allocating, stuff for me to do. He trusted, me completely. Our offices were next to each other. Everything we did, I knew what he was doing. He knew what I was doing. If there's one thing, and that's how you started the question, that I learned from him, it was really, gather information, and then at the end of the day, when it's time to make a decision, don't rely on the information, rely on your gut instincts. Now, of course, that information is a factor, but at the end of the day, rely on your instincts.
You have good instincts because you ran the club for 17 years. You had 5 titles. You were a regular in postseason play.
Well, when Jerry left in 2001, the cupboard was not bare. Okay,
Yeah.
We had Kobe, we had Shaquille, and I tend to think that we should have won, and maybe we should have won more. Of course, we traded Shaquille. We went through a couple of rough years. Kobe stayed with us, and we were able to add a couple of pieces around him, right? Andrew Bynum took a couple of years to develop when he was 17. And then the timing was right to make a trade for a guy like Pau Gasol. So, there was, a lot of good stuff. But at the end of the day, when Jerry left, he left the cupboard full, but there was that one guy who I think was about 25 years old that really made it easy for the next 10, 15 years.
And that one guy,
That one guy was Kobe Bryant.
yeah, he was. If ever there was a sure shot, a can't miss, it was Kobe, wasn't it?
Well, not only did we, understand that, he was a great attraction, a great player, and, we wanted to win, but he really put the pressure, on us, on me, on Dr. Buss. He wasn't happy with just, scoring 35 a game and, creating a legacy that way. He wanted to win. And in a lot of ways, that pressure was good. I think Dr. Buss probably dealt with it better than I did, but it was good for me, because it really pushed me, to look at ways and try to be creative, to get something around him, other than just to allow him score points, but for him to do what he really wanted to do, which was win championships.
Mitch, I've talked to some players who have won titles in other places, and they came here, and they said winning a championship with the Lakers means more than winning a championship with some other teams in the NBA. Why is that?
Well, I think in a lot of ways that is true. The size of the market, and the exposure worldwide. It's a brand that extends beyond, Los Angeles and California. It's a worldwide brand. So, when you do win, with the Lakers, there's a lot that goes along with that. Now, when you lose, there's also a lot of, criticism and pressure. But when you win, it can't get much better.
Yeah, and the other thing is, Dr. Buss wanted to make sure that the Lakers gave back to the community whenever there was the need for that, and you were always there for the community.
Well, yes. I mean, our fans were great fans. I remember Jerry telling me stories in the 60s, when they came from Minnesota. There were no fans, and they were actually in convertibles going up and down blocks with Chick Hearn with the megaphone, making an announcement that there's a basketball team in town, come buy tickets, $2 a ticket, watch us play at the sports arena. That's how it started in 1960, 61. And then, because of the success, right, that the team had, beginning with that 72 team, and then, of course, with Magic and Kareem and then Kobe and Shaquille, the brand just grew. It grew and grew and grew, and it's a worldwide brand. There is a lot of pressure to win, and when you do win, it's
it's really amazing because Los Angeles and Hollywood is full of stars, but when the Lakers played and were successful, the Lakers were the biggest stars in Los Angeles. Even movie stars were in awe of the Lakers.
Yeah, I think so. The players with the Lakers, they are bigger than life, right? You can watch games on TV and you can see Kareem against somebody and, Magic and Kobe and Shaq. And, it's tough to get a perspective on them and how big they are, right? And how small the court is in comparison. But when you meet somebody like that in person, right, who's somebody who's like 7'1", or somebody who's 6'6", and then you go to a game and you see how they can operate so gracefully on the court. Yeah, it's easy, to look at these players and say they're bigger than life, and quite frankly, they really are.
Yeah, because, when you think about it, like we just got through saying, this city was electric. There was something very extra special about the Lakers when they won the championships. I can remember the parades, and it was like the inauguration. Really, when you see the tens and the hundreds of thousands of fans that lined the streets of Los Angeles for the parades, for the championships in the NBA that you helped put together for the Lakers.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. We had more than our fair share. Clearly, at least my tenure there with the Lakers, Dr. Buss, and Jerry West, they got the thing going, and the family now is continuing on with the success. The parades were great. The off season was great, but there was always pressure, almost immediately following the last game, can you do it again? Right? So management and ownership and the coaches, yeah, we enjoyed those parades, but, soon thereafter, it was like sitting down and say, okay, there's pressure now to repeat, right?
Oh yeah, that's for sure. What was it like for you personally when beating the Celtics?
Well, in 85, 84, I was on that team, didn't play much. And frankly, I didn't play much on 85 either, but I did play in the playoffs a little bit. I was very aware of, how the Celtics dominated the Lakers in the 60s, but I didn't have that feeling like it was up to us to change things. When you're on the court and you're trying to win for your teammates, and the coaches in that moment, right? And we lost in 84. And of course, I read some of the stuff in the papers, the Lakers can never beat the Celtics. And I became more familiar with what took place in the 60s. But still, 85 rolls around and it's kind of like, it's the group. Can we figure out a way to win? And, we did beat them and we went to the White House, Ronald Reagan took us in. And then when I got back to Los Angeles, I started getting phone calls and messages from players that played on those teams in the 60s, right? Jerry, of course, Rudy LaRusso, and they were thanking, us and me, for breaking through. So that's when, I really got a sense of, how important it was to beat the Celtics. Now, growing up in New York, the Celtics and the Knicks, they didn't love each other either. So I was never, a Celtic fan. And then when I got to Washington as a player, they didn't like each other that much either. But clearly, after the lack of success the team had in the 60s against the Celtics, and that one time we beat them in 85 the first time, it was, beyond comprehension as to, there's so many people that were able to remember what took place and to feel good about what just happened.
You talk about what just happened. Do you remember how Showtime began?
80 was Irvin's first year in Los Angeles, and that's when, of course, he jumped center in that famous game, and Kareem was hurt, and they went on, to win the championship. So my guess is, that's probably when it started. But my first year and my first coach in Los Angeles was Paul Westhead. And, about 10, 12 games into the season, there was a coaching change, and the style of play was a little bit different. And I think at that point, the Showtime, moniker really began to stick. And then when we got James Worthy, and then, Michael Cooper and Byron Scott, that I think was really when it took off. But when Irvin came to Los Angeles, 79, 80, that had to be the beginning.
Yeah, I know you don't like admitting it, but you had to feel like a proud papa sitting in the stands looking at the product that you helped put together that was so successful.
Well, I will say this. I did enjoy, when we won, I think it was 87 and 88. I was the assistant general manager. Jerry was the general manager. And of course, I took great pride in, and joy in the fact, that we won. But I wasn't leading the show, right? It was, I was a tag along. Now, when Jerry retired and, it was up to me, so to speak, it's like moving over those 18 inches from an assistant coach to a head coach. It's a totally different feel. And when we did get to the finals, I'm going to guess it was 08, 09, and 2010, there was a great feeling of relief. And then when we won, it was joy and relief. And then almost immediately you start thinking about next year. So that's kind of how a GM goes through it. The first time around, I was hanging on to Jerry's coattails. And then the second time around, it was great relief, great satisfaction, but then can we do it again?
Well, Mitch, I thank you so much for doing this, and you can say what you want. You are indeed a Laker legend, and the team would not have accomplished some of the things it has accomplished in the past without you being there to help guide them through those rough waters.
Jim, with nice words like that, I'll do an interview with you anytime you want.